For 30 years, I saved every spare penny for my children's future. By my 65th birthday, I had accumulated over $3 million in assets, properties, and investments, all intended to secure their lives forever. When they didn't show, up to my birthday celebration, I discovered they had been secretly calling my sister's neighbor Mom for years. That night, I made a decision that would change all our lives. I remember the exact moment I started saving. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It was 1992, and I had just finalized my divorce from Richard after 15 difficult years of marriage. I was 35 years old with 2 children, my daughter Melanie, who was 10, and my son Drew, who was 8. We had lost our family home in the settlement, and I had moved the 3 of us into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Oak Ridge. The apartment was nothing special. Peeling wallpaper in the bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough for a small table, and a living room that doubled as my bedroom each night when I unfolded the sofa bed. The children shared the master bedroom with a curtain hung between their beds for privacy. It wasn't ideal, but it was all I could afford on my entry-level office administrator salary. That first month was the hardest. After paying the security deposit, first month's rent, and utility connections, I had exactly $73 left in my checking account to last us until my next paycheck. I remember standing in the grocery store, calculator in hand, adding up every item I put in the cart, making sure we wouldn't go over budget. That night, as the children slept, I sat at our wobbly kitchen table and made a promise to myself. I would never let my children experience financial insecurity again. I opened a small notebook and created a savings plan. Even if it was just $25 a month to start, I would begin building something for them. Richard's child support payments were inconsistent at best. He had moved across the country for a new job opportunity, and his visits became increasingly rare. By the time Melanie turned 12, he had essentially vanished from our lives, save for the occasional birthday card with a $20 bill tucked inside. I worked long hours at the office during the day, then took on evening data entry jobs I could do from home after the children were asleep. On weekends, I cleaned houses for extra cash. Every penny beyond our basic needs went into my savings account, labeled simply for M&D. When my company offered night classes in computer programming, I signed up immediately. For 6 months, I survived on 4 hours of sleep. My neighbor, Ms. Williams, would check on the children while I attended classes 3 evenings a week. Chatify sacrifice paid off when I was promoted to the IT department, with a 40% salary increase. I'll never forget the day I received that first bigger paycheck. I took the children out for ice cream, a rare treat, and told them, things are going to get a little easier now. What I didn't tell them was that most of the raise would go straight into savings. By the time Melanie turned 16, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small 3-bedroom house. Moving day was one of the happiest of my life. Watching my children explore their new rooms, each having their own space for the first time in years, I felt a surge of pride. That night, I updated my notebook. $42,000 in savings and a house with our name on the deed. The children thrived in high school. Melanie was a gifted student with dreams of becoming a doctor. Drew had a talent for music and wanted to study at a conservatory. I knew both paths would be expensive, but I was determined to make them possible. For 7 years, I lived on the financial edge to ensure they graduated debt-free. When Melanie decided to continue to medical school, I dipped into my retirement. Savings to help. When Drew needed industry connections in Los Angeles, I paid for his apartment in a safer neighborhood while he established himself. By my 55th birthday, both children had completed their education and were beginning their careers. Melanie joined a prestigious hospital in Chicago, and Drew secured a position composing for an independent film studio in Los Angeles. I was immensely proud, but also exhausted. 30 years of nonstop work had taken a physical toll. my doctor, warned me about my blood pressure and recommended I reduce my stress. It was time to think about my own future. I calculated that I would need to work until at least 70 to rebuild my depleted retirement accounts. The house needed repairs I'd been postponing, and my 15-year-old car was showing its age. Then came the unexpected phone call that changed everything. Ms. Blackwood? This is Attorney James Harrington with Harrington, Myers & Walsh. I'm calling regarding your aunt, Evelyn Winslow. Aunt Evelyn. I hadn't seen her in nearly 20 years. She was my mother's older sister, a stern woman who had never married and had built a successful business importing textiles. Our family visits to her grand house on Lake Michigan had been formal, uncomfortable affairs. I regret to inform you of Ms. Winslow's passing, the attorney continued. Her funeral was held last week, according to her wishes for a private service. I felt a twinge of sadness that I hadn't known, hadn't been able to pay my respects. The reason for my call is that you are named as the primary beneficiary in Ms. Winslow's will. She has left you her estate in its entirety. I nearly dropped the phone. There must be some mistake, I stammered. We weren't close. We haven't spoken in decades. There's no mistake, Ms. Blackwood. Your aunt kept meticulous records of your life. She apparently followed your career and your children's progress from a distance. She left a letter explaining that she admired how you raised your family on your own and wanted to reward your determination. The estate, as it turned out, was substantial. Aunt Evelyn's lakefront property alone was worth over $2 million. Her investment portfolio, art collection, and cash assets brought the total closer to $5 million. At 58 years old, I had suddenly become wealthy. For the first few weeks, I told no one. I continued going to work, driving my aging car, and living my modest life while I processed this extraordinary turn of events. I met with financial advisors, tax specialists, and estate planners to understand my new circumstances. Now, as my 65th birthday approached, I had finally made a decision. It was time to retire and to share my good fortune with Melanie and Drew. I would give them each $1 million, enough to change their lives forever while still securing my own retirement. I would announce it at my birthday dinner, a celebration of our journey together and the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. With excitement building, I spent weeks preparing for the perfect birthday gathering. I reserved the private room at the Wharf, an upscale restaurant overlooking the harbor. I arranged for Melanie and Drew to fly in, booking their tickets myself and reserving rooms at the boutique hotel next door. I had official bank documents, prepared, the checks made out in their names, elegantly presented in embossed envelopes. Everything was ready for a celebration none of us would ever forget. My birthday fell on a Saturday that year, perfect for a celebration. I spent the morning at an upscale salon getting my hair styled for the first time in years. The stylist convinced me to try a softer color, something that would bring out my eyes, as she put it. I even splurged on a professional makeup session. Looking in the mirror afterward, I barely recognized myself. The tired lines around my eyes seemed less pronounced, and there was a glow to my skin I hadn't seen in decades. Next came the new dress, a deep teal A-line that the boutique owner assured me was elegant without trying too hard. Sophisticated but not stuffy, she had said. The price tag made me wince out of habit, even though I knew money was no longer a concern. I had always been practical about money, frugal by necessity for so many years that it had become second nature. The $180 price tag on the dress would have been unthinkable just months earlier. But today was different. Today I wasn't just Melanie and Drew's mother, the provider, the practical one. Today I was celebrating not only my birthday, but also the fruits of 30 years of sacrifice and hard work. I spent the afternoon making final arrangements. I called the restaurant to confirm our reservation and to check on the special menu I had requested. I wanted everything to be perfect. Melanie's favorite seafood appetizers, Drew's preferred steak, and a decadent chocolate soufflé for dessert that we could share, just as we had when they were children. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I called the florist to make sure the table arrangement would include lilies, Melanie's favorite. I confirmed with the pianist that he would be able to play Autumn Leaves, the piece Drew had composed for me on my 50th birthday. No detail was too small to consider. As I prepared, I imagined their reactions. Would they be shocked? Overwhelmed? Perhaps even a little uncomfortable with such a substantial gift. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would explain that this wasn't just about money. It was about freedom. The freedom to pursue their deepest passions without the constraints that had limited my own choices for so many years. For Melanie, it would mean the opportunity to open the small family practice she had always dreamed of, rather than remaining tethered to the demanding hospital schedule that left her perpetually exhausted. I knew she wanted children someday, but worried about balancing motherhood with her medical career. This gift would give her options. For Drew, it would provide the financial security to take risks with his music. He had confided in me once that he had symphonic compositions he wanted to develop, creative projects that might not be immediately profitable but would fulfill him, artistically. Now he could pursue those dreams without worry. As I clasped the simple pearl necklace around my neck, a splurge I had allowed myself for my 60th birthday, I felt a surge of gratitude for Aunt Evelyn. Her unexpected generosity had made all of this possible. Though we had never been close, she had been watching from a distance, silently approving of the choices I had made, the life I had built from nearly nothing. In her letter, left with the will she had written, "Coral, I have observed your quiet strength over the years. You remind me of myself in many ways, though you have shown a courage in motherhood that I never possessed. Consider this inheritance not charity, but recognition. One independent woman acknowledging another." By 5 o'clock, I was seated at our reserved table, everything meticulously arranged, a bottle of champagne chilled in an ice bucket. The gift envelopes were positioned discreetly next to my place setting. I had requested a special menu featuring both children's favorite dishes, Melanie's love of seafood and Drew's preference for traditional Italian. For dessert, the chef had prepared a chocolate souffle with 3 spoons, just as we'd shared desserts when they were young. Melanie's flight had landed at 2:30 and Drew's at 3:15. They had both texted confirming their arrivals. Melanie wrote, "Just checking into the hotel. Can't wait to see you." Drew sent a simple, "Made it. See you at 6. I imagined them freshening up after their flights, perhaps taking a quick rest before our reunion. I checked my reflection one last time in the small mirror from my purse. The woman looking back at me seemed different somehow, not just because of the professional styling and new dress, but something in her eyes. Pride, perhaps. Accomplishment. The knowledge that after decades of putting everyone else first, I was finally in a position to do something extraordinary for the people I loved most in the world. The maitre d' approached with a warm smile. "Everything is arranged as you requested, Ms. Blackwood. May I pour you a glass of water while you wait for your guests?" "Yes, thank you," I replied, smoothing my napkin across my lap. "They should be here any minute." I gazed out the window at the harbor, watching boats gently rocking in their slips, seagulls wheeling against the darkening sky. The water reflected the first twinkling lights from the buildings along the shore. It was a perfect evening, the kind that seems designed for celebrations and new beginnings. I checked my watch. 5:55 p.m. They would be here any moment. 6 o'clock came and went. I sipped water, smiling politely when the server came by to check if I was ready to order. "I'm waiting for my children," I explained. "They should be here any minute." By 6:30, I had texted both of them. No response. The restaurant was filling up, animated conversations and laughter surrounding my quiet table. I called Melanie's cell, then Drew's. Both went to voicemail. At 7, the server returned with a sympathetic smile. "Perhaps we could go ahead and open the champagne while you wait." I nodded, my throat tight. As he poured, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. By 7:45, I had called both of their hotel rooms. No answer. I texted again. "Is everything okay? I'm getting worried." At 8:15, my phone finally chimed. A text from Melanie. "So sorry, Mom. Got caught up with some colleagues who are also in town. Lost track of time. Can we reschedule for tomorrow?" Before I could respond, another message came through from Drew. "Something came up. Talk tomorrow." I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the brief messages. Colleagues? Something came up? I had booked their flights, their hotels. I had been planning this for weeks. They had confirmed just hours ago. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" The server's voice broke through my daze. "Yes," I said automatically. "No, I'm not sure. My children seem to be delayed." His eyes flickered too, the champagne, now warm in its bucket, and the untouched place settings. "Would you like to order something while you wait?" I couldn't bear the pity in his eyes. "Actually, I think I'll need to cancel our reservation. Something has come up." I gathered my purse and the envelopes, leaving enough cash to cover the champagne, and a generous tip for the server's kindness. The walk back to my car felt endless. My new shoes pinched uncomfortably, and the night air had turned chilly against my bare arms. Back at my hotel suite, I kicked off my shoes and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. Something wasn't right. Melanie and Drew had always been considerate, even when they were busy with their careers. They knew how much effort I had put into this evening. To cancel at the last minute without even a phone call, it was so unlike them. I opened my laptop and logged into my email, searching for their flight confirmations. Both flights had arrived on time. I called the hotel front desk. "This is Elizabeth Blackwood. My daughter Melanie and son Drew are staying with you. Could you connect me to their rooms?" "One moment, please." After a brief pause, "I'm sorry, Ms. Blackwood, but there's no answer in either room. Could you check if they're in the hotel restaurant or lounge?" "Of course." Another wait. "I don't see them in any of our public areas, but they could be outside, on the terrace." I thanked her and hung up, more confused than before. Where could they be? Melanie had mentioned colleagues, but she didn't know anyone in this city besides me. On a hunch, I opened my social media account, something I rarely used except to see updates about my children and their lives. Scrolling through recent posts, I found nothing from either of them today. But then I noticed a photo posted by Olivia, Drew's girlfriend of 2 years. The image showed a large group gathered around a long table in what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. The caption read, "Surprise reunion? So good to see everyone together after all these years." I leaned closer to the screen, my heart suddenly pounding. There, at the far end of the table, I could make out Drew's profile, and beside him, unmistakably, was Melanie's curly hair, caught mid-laugh. The timestamp on the post, 7:38 p.m. Right. When I had been sitting alone, calling their empty hotel rooms. With trembling fingers, I enlarged the image, trying to see more details of the gathering. Who were all these people? Why would my children lie about where they were? The restaurant looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I scrolled down to read the comments and froze when I saw Melanie's response. "Couldn't miss Barbara's special day. So worth the trip." Barbara? The name struck me like a physical blow. Barbara Winters was my sister Diane's neighbor, a woman I had met perhaps twice at family gatherings years ago. What possible connection could my children have to her that would make them skip my birthday celebration? Scrolling further, I found another comment, this one from Drew responding to someone I didn't recognize. "Wouldn't miss Mom's 60th for anything. Been planning this trip for months. Mom." He had called Barbara Mom, The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the desk, trying to steady myself as the pieces began to fall into horrifying place. Another photo appeared in the thread, posted by someone named Thomas. This one showed Melanie presenting a large gift box to Barbara. The caption, "Mel giving Mom the necklace she's been eyeing all year. Pure gold and emeralds to match her eyes. Pure gold and emeralds." My daughter, who had texted that she was caught up with colleagues, was actually giving expensive jewelry to another woman, a woman my children apparently called Mom. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a sick feeling growing in my stomach. I should close the laptop, stop looking, protect myself from whatever else I might discover. But I couldn't. Instead, I typed Barbara's name into the search bar and found her profile. What I saw there shattered the last of my illusions. Years of photos, holidays, graduations, weekends at the lake. Barbara with my children. Her children. According to her captions. Barbara at Melanie's medical school graduation, standing where I should have been. Barbara at Drew's first film premiere, beaming with pride. A life parallel to the one I thought we shared, hidden in plain sight. And there, posted just yesterday. So excited for my 60th birthday tomorrow. Can't wait to have all my children together. Again, Melanie and Drew are flying in special for the occasion. Tomorrow. Barbara's birthday was tomorrow, Sunday. My birthday was today, Saturday. My children had flown in a day early, not to celebrate with me, but to prepare for her celebration. They had lied, made excuses, left me sitting alone in a restaurant while they attended a surprise reunion. The realization was like ice water in my veins. They had been living double lives for years, presenting themselves as my loving, grateful children while secretly building a relationship with this other mother. And suddenly, pieces of the past several years clicked into place. The canceled holiday visits, the shortened stays, the vague references to friends in town whenever they visited. All this time, they had been maintaining two family relationships, one with me, their actual mother who had sacrificed everything for them, and one with Barbara, who had apparently claimed them as her own. The wealth I had planned to share with them tonight felt like ash in my mouth. The envelopes on the bedside table mocked me with their elegance. My children had made their choice, and it wasn't me. I barely slept that night. My mind raced through decades of memories, re-examining them for signs I might have missed. Had there been hints of this betrayal all along? When had Barbara entered their lives? And how had she managed to insert herself so deeply into my family? By morning, grief had hardened into something sharper, more focused. I opened my laptop again and began a systematic investigation into this woman who had apparently stolen my children. Barbara Winters, 59, divorced, former school counselor now retired. She had lived next door to my sister Diane for 15 years. Her own children, 2 sons, had moved abroad years ago, one to Australia and one to Germany. According to her social media, she rarely saw them. The earliest photo I could find of Barbara with my children was from 12 years ago, a Thanksgiving dinner at Diane's house. I remembered that year vaguely. I had been unable to travel for the holiday due to a work emergency. Melanie and Drew, both in college then, had gone to Aunt Diane's instead. After that, the pictures multiplied. Weekend visits, holidays, casual gatherings. In one album titled Summer at the Lake 2016, I found dozens of photos of Barbara's lakefront cottage. My children looked relaxed there, laughing in Adirondack chairs, swimming from a private dock, roasting marshmallows around a fire pit. That summer, they had told me they were both too busy to visit. Melanie had claimed hospital rotations. Drew had mentioned a tight production schedule. I had accepted their excuses without question, disappointed but understanding of their demanding careers. I continued scrolling, my stomach tightening with each discovery. A photo from 5 years ago caught my eye. Barbara standing between Melanie and Drew at what appeared to be a formal dinner. The caption read, "So proud of my two accomplished children, Dr. Blackwood and the composer extraordinaire, Dr. Blackwood. My daughter, the daughter whose medical school I had paid for by draining my retirement savings. The daughter who had hugged me at her graduation and whispered, 'I couldn't have done this without you, Mom.' And all the while, she had been building this other relationship, allowing another woman to claim her achievements, to call her daughter. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, staring at the envelope on the nightstand. Inside was a cashier's check for $1 million made out to Melanie, and a nearly identical one for Drew. Life-changing amounts I had planned to give them out of love. My phone chimed with a text from Melanie. "Good morning. Drew and I can meet you for brunch at 11. How about the garden terrace at your hotel?" So casual, so normal, as if they hadn't shattered my world the night before. With trembling hands, I replied, "I've seen the photos from last night. Barbara's birthday celebration. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Mom, we can explain. It's not what you think." I didn't respond. Instead, I called the front desk and arranged for a late checkout. The thought of sitting across from them, listening to more excuses, more fabrications, made my stomach clench. I needed time to process, to decide how to respond to this betrayal. Around 10, my phone rang. It was Drew. I let it go to voicemail. Minutes later, Melanie called. Again, I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to hear their voices, to risk being swayed by familiar patterns of guilt and obligation. Text messages followed in rapid succession. Drew. "Mom, please pick up. This is all a misunderstanding." Melanie. "We should talk in person. Let us explain before you jump to conclusions." Drew. "Barbara is just a friend of the family. It's not what it looks like." Melanie. "The mom thing is just a joke. It started years ago and stuck. It doesn't mean anything." Each message seemed more desperate than the last, contradicting the evidence I had seen with my own eyes. If Barbara was just a family friend, why had they lied about where they were last night? If the mom term was just a joke, why use it consistently for years? Why travel across the country for her birthday but skip mine? I set my phone aside and began to pack. As I folded my new dress, the one I'd bought specially for last night's celebration, another text arrived. This one was from an unknown number. "Ms. Blackwood, this is Barbara Winters. Your children told me what happened. I feel terrible about the misunderstanding. I never meant to insert myself between you and your wonderful children. Please call me so we can clear this up." The audacity took my breath away. This woman, this stranger, who had apparently been playing mother to my children for years, now wanted to clear things up, as if this were some minor social faux pas. I blocked her number without responding. By noon, I had checked out of the hotel and was driving home, the envelopes with the cashier's checks locked securely in my briefcase beside me. The 4-hour drive gave me time to think, to process, to begin forming a plan. My children clearly had explanations prepared. I could imagine what they might say. It just happened gradually. She was lonely and we felt sorry for her. It doesn't change how we feel about you. You're overreacting. Perhaps there was some truth in these imagined excuses. Perhaps Barbara had been lonely, with her own children so far away. Perhaps it had started innocently enough. Perhaps they did still love me in their way. But the deliberate deception, the years of lies, the careful compartmentalization of their lives, the elaborate performance of devotion to me while building this parallel family with her, that couldn't be explained away. As I drove, my phone continued to buzz with messages and calls. I kept it on only in case of emergency, glancing occasionally at the screen. They were persistent. I had to give them that. "Mom, where are you? We're at the hotel, but they said you checked out. Please don't leave like this. At least let us explain in person. We're worried about you. Just let us know you're safe. That last one made me laugh bitterly. Now they were worried about me? Where was that concern last night as I sat alone in the restaurant waiting and wondering? About halfway home, I pulled into a rest area and finally called them, not to hear their explanations, but to end the barrage of messages. Melanie answered on the first ring. Mom, where are you? We've been so worried. I'm driving home, I said, my voice calm and controlled. I need some space right now. But Mom, we need to talk about this. It's all a misunderstanding. Is it? I interrupted. Was it a misunderstanding? When you told me you were with colleagues last night but were actually at Barbara's birthday celebration. Was it a misunderstanding when Drew has been calling another woman Mom for years? Silence on the other end. Then, it's complicated. I'm sure it is, I replied. And I'm not ready to hear your complicated explanations yet. I've texted you to let you know I'm safe. That's all you need for now. Mom, please. I ended the call and turned off my phone completely. The rest of the drive passed in a strange, numb silence. No radio, no calls. Just the hum of the road beneath my tires and the steady dismantling of everything I thought I knew about my family. By the time I reached my house, darkness had fallen. I let myself in, dropped my bags in the entryway, and stood in the quiet living room. Photos of Melanie and Drew smiled at me from every surface. Graduations, birthdays, holidays. Moments I had treasured, believing they represented our special bond. Now I wondered how many of those smiles had been genuine. How many times had they been wishing they were with Barbara instead? How often had I been the obligation, the responsibility, while she was the choice, the preference? I moved through the house, turning on lights, my footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. The home that had once felt filled with love and memories now seemed like a museum of deception. Tomorrow, I would have to decide what to do next. But tonight, I needed rest. I needed to let the shock subside enough that I could think clearly about the path forward. As I got ready for bed, one thought kept circling in my mind. For 30 years, I had lived for my children. Every decision, every sacrifice, every plan had been about securing their happiness and future. Perhaps it was finally time to live for myself. The next morning, after a fitful night's sleep, I forced myself to face the full reality of what I had discovered. With a cup of strong coffee beside me, I reopened my laptop and continued my investigation, determined to understand the complete extent of my children's deception. What I found was more devastating than I had imagined. Barbara's social media profiles revealed an entire alternate family history. There were birthday celebrations I had never known about, holiday gatherings when my children had told me they were too busy to visit, even vacations they had taken together to places like the Outer Banks and the Grand Canyon. One post from 3 years ago showed Barbara, Melanie, and Drew at a cooking class in Tuscany. "Best Mother's Day gift ever from my 2 wonderful children," the caption read. That same year, I had received a quick phone call and flowers delivered by a service from Melanie, who had claimed she was stuck at the hospital for a 36-hour shift. Drew had sent a text message, explaining he was on a tight deadline for a film score. I had believed them. I had always believed them. As I scrolled further back, the timeline became clear. Their relationship with Barbara had begun 12 years ago at that Thanksgiving dinner at Diane's house, but it had transformed from a casual acquaintance to something much deeper over the following years. 5 years ago, they had started referring to her as Mom in their posts. Around that same time, their visits to me had grown shorter and less frequent. They always had plausible excuses: work obligations, travel complications, limited vacation time. I had accepted these explanations without question, grateful for whatever time they could spare for me. I had never complained, never demanded more. I understood the pressures of their careers because I had worked so hard to make those careers possible. What hurt most were the comments on these posts, The casual references to mom's lasagna or mom's advice about relationships. The way they shared inside jokes and family stories with this woman, stories that should have been ours alone. There was even a photo album titled Mom's 55th Birthday Surprise, showing an elaborate party they had thrown for Barbara 5 years ago. They had rented a yacht, invited dozens of guests, and presented her with a diamond bracelet. That same year, my birthday had passed with just a phone call from each of them and a promise to celebrate the next time we're in town. The betrayal cut deeper with each new discovery, but what truly broke me was finding a comment from Drew on a Christmas photo from 2 years ago. "No one makes holidays special like you do, Mom. Your home always feels like the heart of our family." The heart of our family. Not my home, where I had raised them alone, where I had created magic out of nothing during the lean years, where I had held them through nightmares and heartbreaks and disappointments. No, apparently the heart of their family was Barbara's lakefront cottage with its picture-perfect decorations and catered meals. I closed the laptop, unable to bear any more. Rising from my desk, I moved through the house like a ghost, seeing it suddenly through their eyes. My modest home, maintained but never luxurious. The practical furniture I'd kept for decades because it was still functional. The kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals on a tight budget. The backyard where I'd hung a tire swing and later a hammock, creating what joy I could afford. Had they been comparing all of this to Barbara's more affluent lifestyle? Had they found me lacking? Was that why they had created this alternate family life, because she could offer them material comforts and social connections that I couldn't? My phone rang, interrupting these painful thoughts. It was my sister Diane. I hesitated, then answered. "Coral, what's going on?" Her voice was sharp with concern. "Melanie and Drew have been calling me nonstop, saying you've disappeared and won't answer their calls." I took a deep breath. "I haven't disappeared. I'm at home. I just needed some space after discovering they've been calling your neighbor Mom for years and skipped my birthday to attend her celebration." Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh, Coral, I'm so sorry." "You knew?" My hand tightened around the phone. "You knew about this and never told me?" Her sigh was heavy with guilt. "Not at first. I noticed them visiting Barbara more frequently after that Thanksgiving. But I thought they were just being kind to a lonely neighbor. It wasn't until a few years ago that I realized how close they'd become." "And you didn't think I deserved to know that my children had adopted another mother? I tried to bring it up once, remember? About 3 years ago when I visited for your birthday? I mentioned that Melanie and Drew seemed to be spending a lot of time with Barbara whenever they were in town. You changed the subject." I did remember. I had thought she was making a casual observation, not trying to reveal a years-long deception. I had changed the subject because I didn't want to dwell on how rarely my children visited me. "They should have told you themselves," Diane continued. "It wasn't my place to interfere in your relationship with your children." "No," I agreed bitterly. "Apparently that was Barbara's place." "Coral, it's not what you think. Barbara never tried to replace you. Save it." I cut her off. "I've seen enough pictures and posts to know exactly what's been happening. I've been raising my children alone for 30 years, Diane. 30 years of sacrifice and struggle and doing without. And this is how they repay me, by building a secret. Relationship with another mother figure and lying to my face about it." "They love you," she insisted. "They're devastated that you found out this way. They've been trying to figure out how to tell you for years, but they were afraid of hurting you. So instead they hurt me by living a double life, by skipping my birthday dinner to attend hers. That was their solution? They made a terrible mistake," Diane admitted. "But don't throw away your relationship with your children over this. At least hear them out." "I will," I said, my voice calmer now. "But not yet. I need time to process this and decide what it means for our future." After hanging up, I walked to my bedroom and opened the drawer where I had placed the envelopes containing the cashier's checks. $1 million each, intended to free my children to pursue their dreams without financial constraints. A gift. I had planned for 3 decades, but now I understood that money wasn't the only thing I had been saving all these years. I had also been saving my own identity, my own dreams, my own potential, setting it all aside to focus exclusively on being Melanie and Drew's mother. And while I had been defining myself solely through my relationship to them, they had been building a life that increasingly excluded me. They had found another mother, created another family, established another home that felt, in Drew's words, like the heart of our family. The realization was both devastating and, strangely, liberating. If I wasn't just Melanie and Drew's mother, if that role had been partially filled by someone else without my knowledge or consent, then perhaps it was time to discover who else I could be. I picked up my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to my attorney, James Harrington, requesting an urgent appointment the following morning. I need to make some significant changes to my will and financial arrangements, I told him. The second call was to my bank, asking them to stop payment on the cashier's checks I had obtained. They were still in my possession, never having been delivered to my children, so this was a simple matter to resolve. As I hung up, I felt a curious lightness. For decades, I had shaped my life around my children's needs and futures. Now, for the first time, I was considering my own path forward, a path that would no longer be defined exclusively by motherhood. My children had made their choice. They had decided that one mother wasn't enough, that they needed or wanted what Barbara could provide. They had created a whole separate family life without my knowledge or inclusion. Now it was my turn to make a choice. And I chose myself. That evening, when Melanie called for the 10th time, I finally answered. "Mom," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "Please let us explain. We never meant to hurt you." "I'll listen to your explanation," I said calmly. "But not now. I need more time." "How much time?" The edge of impatience in her tone was revealing. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "How long did it take you to build this relationship with Barbara? How many years have you been calling her mom? How long have you been living this double life?" Silence on the other end. "That's what I thought," I continued. "I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk. Until then, please respect my need for space." I ended the call before she could respond, then turned off my phone again. Tomorrow would bring difficult decisions and uncomfortable conversations. But tonight, I would allow myself to grieve. For the family I thought we were. For the mother I had tried to be. And for the woman I had never allowed myself to become. The morning of my appointment with James Harrington, I woke early and found myself staring at the ceiling, my mind drifting back through the decades of my life as a mother. In the quiet darkness, I allowed myself to remember not just the joys, but also the struggles, the exhaustion, the countless times I had put my children's needs before my own. I remembered the night Melanie had come down with a high fever when she was 4. I had been battling the flu myself, barely able to stand, but I had sat up all night with her, cooling her forehead with damp cloths, monitoring her temperature, too worried to sleep. There was no one else to tag in, no partner to take a shift. It was just me. I remembered working through lunch breaks to attend Drew's school concerts, rushing across town in midday traffic, sometimes arriving just as he was stepping onto the stage, my stomach empty but my heart full as I watched him play. I remembered the Christmas when both children had asked for bicycles, far beyond what I could afford that year. I had taken a second job stocking shelves at a grocery store overnight, working from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., then going directly to my regular job from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. For 6 weeks, I had survived on 3 hours of sleep a day, but on Christmas morning, there were 2 shiny new bicycles under our modest tree. I remembered postponing dental work I desperately needed because Melanie's growth spurt meant she needed all new clothes the same month the water heater broke. I remembered driving a car with failing brakes for 2 terrifying weeks because Drew's school trip deposit was due. I remembered eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so my children could have the protein-rich meals their growing bodies needed. I had done it all without complaint, without expecting gratitude, without keeping score. That's what mothers do, I had told myself. They sacrifice, they endure, they put their children first. But now, in the growing light of morning, I asked myself, had it been worth it? Had all those sacrifices, the physical toll on my body, the opportunities I had passed up, the pleasures I had denied myself, been worth it, given where we had ended up? Had I been a good mother, or merely a useful one? Had my children loved me for who I was, or simply for what I provided? These questions had no easy answers. What I did know was that I had given them everything I could. I had raised them to be kind, successful, independent adults. I had loved them unconditionally, and they had found another mother. I rose from bed and prepared for the day with unusual care. For my meeting with James, I selected a tailored navy suit I had purchased for Melanie's medical school graduation, silk blouse, pearl earrings, low heels that were professional but comfortable. I applied makeup with a steady hand and arranged my silver-streaked hair in a neat chignon. The woman in the mirror looked composed, dignified. Only her eyes revealed the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. James greeted me warmly when I arrived at his office, though his expression turned serious when we sat down. "Coral," he began, using my first name now that we had known each other for several years. "You mentioned on the phone that you want to make significant changes to your estate planning. May I ask what's prompted this?" I took a deep breath. "My children have been living a double life," I said simply. "They've established a relationship with another mother figure, someone they've been calling Mom for years without my knowledge. They skipped my birthday celebration to attend hers." James's eyebrows rose in surprise. "I see. And this has changed your feelings about your previous financial arrangements?" "Yes. I had planned to give each of them a substantial gift, $1 million, as well as setting up trusts that would provide for them after my death. I've reconsidered those plans." "These are significant changes," he said carefully. "And while I understand you're hurt, family estrangements can sometimes be temporary. Are you certain you want to make these alterations now, while emotions are running high?" I appreciated his caution. "I'm not making these decisions out of anger or a desire for revenge," I assured him. "I'm making them because I've realized that my children are adults with successful careers who don't need my financial support. They have another mother figure in their lives, and I have an opportunity to use my unexpected wealth in ways that align with my values." James nodded, accepting my explanation. "What changes did you have in mind?" For the next hour, we worked through my new estate plan. The bulk of my inheritance would be divided 3 ways: a comfortable retirement fund for myself, a foundation to support single parents pursuing education, and a series of charitable donations to organizations that had helped me during my most difficult years as a young mother. "And your children?" James asked. "Will they receive anything?" I had thought carefully about this. "I don't want to disinherit them completely," I said. "That would feel punitive, and that's not my intention. Instead, I'd like to establish educational trusts for any grandchildren they might have someday, and modest retirement supplements that will activate when they turn 65. "So delayed benefits rather than immediate ones," James observed. "Yes. Support for their long-term security, but not a windfall they haven't earned." As I signed the final documents, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, but also a quiet determination about the path ahead. For the first time in decades, I was making major life decisions based on my own needs and values, not solely on what would benefit my children. After leaving James's office, I drove to a small cafe by the harbor for lunch. I selected a table overlooking the water and ordered a glass of white wine with my meal, another small luxury I rarely allowed myself. As I watched sailboats gliding across the bay, my thoughts turned to the future. What did I want for myself? In the years ahead? What dreams had I set aside? What might bring me joy beyond my identity as Melanie and Drew's mother? I had no immediate answers. For so long, my horizons had been limited by responsibility and financial constraints. The sudden freedom, both emotional and financial, was disorienting, but it was also exhilarating. My phone vibrated in my purse. Drew calling again. I silenced it without answering. I wasn't ready yet. I needed more time to strengthen my resolve, to clarify my thoughts, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Later that afternoon, I found myself driving past my old neighborhood, the one where we had lived after I purchased our first real home. On impulse, I turned down Maple Street and parked across from the modest 3-bedroom house where I had raised my children. It looked smaller than I remembered. The blue paint faded, the front garden overgrown. The maple tree I had planted when we first moved in now towered over the yard, its canopy spreading wide. The tire swing was long gone, of course, but I could still picture Drew pushing Melanie, her curls flying as she squealed with delight. So, many memories in that house. First days of school, lost teeth, science projects spread across the dining table, teenage heartbreaks, college acceptance letters. Through it all, I had been their constant, the one person they could always count on, the mother who would move heaven and earth to give them what they needed. Or so I had believed. Now I wondered, had I given them too much? Had my sacrifices taught them to take rather than to appreciate? Had my willingness to always put them first created an expectation that everyone in their lives should do the same? I couldn't blame Barbara entirely. She hadn't forced my children to call her mom or to spend holidays with her instead of me. They had made those choices, and while I was deeply hurt by their deception, I had to acknowledge my own role in creating the dynamic that had led us here. Perhaps I had been too self-effacing, too willing to accept whatever crumbs of time and attention they offered. Perhaps I had trained them to see me as someone whose needs were secondary, whose feelings could be considered after everything and everyone else. That would change now. It had to change. Not out of bitterness or a desire to punish them, but because I finally understood that allowing others to consistently put you last is not a virtue. It's a form of self-erasure. As I pulled away from the old house, I made a silent promise to myself. From now on, I would ensure that my own needs and feelings were given the same consideration I had always given to others. I would learn to value myself the way I had valued my children. It wouldn't be easy. Decades of putting myself last had created deep grooves of habit and thought. But I had been strong enough to raise 2 children alone, to build a career from nothing, to weather countless hardships without breaking. I was strong enough for this too. I returned home just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across my front yard. Inside, the house felt different somehow, less like a shrine to my children's achievements and more like a space waiting to be reimagined. Tonight, I would allow myself to rest. Tomorrow, I would begin considering what changes I wanted to make, to my home, to my daily routines, to my life. For 30 years, I had been defined primarily as Melanie and Drew's mother. Now it was time to discover who else Coral Blackwood might be. After 3 days of reflection and planning, I was ready to take decisive action. The morning dawned clear and bright, matching my newfound clarity of purpose. I had allowed myself to fully feel the hurt and betrayal, but now it was time to move forward, not in anger, but with deliberate intention. My first phone call was to a real estate agent I had met at one of Diane's dinner parties years ago. Sarah Peterson specialized in luxury properties and had always struck me as both knowledgeable and straightforward. I'm interested in selling my current home and purchasing a condominium, I explained after we exchanged pleasantries. Something in Harborside Towers, if possible. Harborside? That's quite a change from your neighborhood, Sarah remarked. Those units start at around $750,000. I'm aware, I replied calmly. I've recently come into an inheritance and I'm ready for a significant lifestyle change. We arranged to meet that afternoon to discuss details. After hanging up, I called a professional organizing service to help me begin the process of downsizing. 30 years in the same home had resulted in considerable accumulation, and I knew I would need help sorting through it all. My next call was to Westlake University's Continuing Education Department. After navigating their automated system, I reached an admissions counselor who helped me register for 2 courses starting the following month: Art History, Renaissance Masters, and Conversational Italian for Beginners. Will you be seeking a certificate or degree? She asked as she processed my registration. No, I replied. I'm learning purely for my own enjoyment. It felt indulgent, almost rebellious to pursue education with no practical purpose. No career, advancement, no resume building, just the pure pleasure of learning something new. When was the last time I had done anything solely because it interested me? My final call that morning was to a foundation consultant recommended by James Harrington. Martin Cohen had helped numerous clients establish charitable foundations and had a particular interest in educational initiatives. I'd like to create a scholarship fund for single parents returning to education, I explained. Something that covers not just tuition, but also childcare, technology needs, and emergency expenses. That's a comprehensive approach, Martin noted approvingly. Most scholarships focus only on tuition, but those additional expenses are often what derail completion for non-traditional students. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to begin drafting a mission statement and application criteria. As I hung up, I felt a surge of excitement. This foundation would transform my personal struggles into something positive, creating opportunities for others facing the same challenges I had overcome. By noon, I had set in motion 3 major life changes: a new home, new intellectual pursuits, and a meaningful philanthropic legacy. But the most difficult task still lay ahead. I took a deep breath and turned my phone back on. As expected, there were dozens of missed calls and messages from Melanie and Drew. Their tone had evolved from concern to frustration to outright anger. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear and refuse to talk to us. We're adults with busy lives. We can't keep dropping everything because you're having some kind of crisis. If you would just answer your phone, we could explain everything. The most recent message, sent this morning, showed signs of desperation. We're flying back this weekend if you don't call us. This has gone on long enough. Their threats didn't move me. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if I were observing a familiar pattern from a new perspective. How many times had my children expected me to accommodate their schedules, their preferences, their needs? How often had I rearranged my life to make things easier for them, while they offered no such consideration in return? I texted them both the same message. I'm safe and well. I'll be ready to talk in 1 week. Until then, I need space to process recent events. Please respect this boundary. Then I turned my phone to silent again and placed it in a drawer. They would have to wait. For once, my timeline would take precedence. Sarah arrived promptly at 2 o'clock, portfolio in hand. I gave her a tour of my house, noting the improvements I'd made over the years as well as the updates it still needed. It's a lovely family home, she commented. But if you're looking for a lifestyle change, Harborside is an excellent choice. I actually have a client who just listed a 2-bedroom with a harbor view on the 8th floor. She opened her tablet and showed me photos of a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a balcony overlooking the water. The kitchen featured stone countertops and high-end appliances. The master bathroom had a soaking tub positioned to take advantage of the view. "It's beautiful," I breathed, already imagining myself in that space. So different from my practical, family-oriented home. "When can I see it?" "How about tomorrow?" "Morning?" "It just listed yesterday and I expect it won't stay on the market long." We agreed on a time, and Sarah promised to prepare a comparative market analysis to help determine an asking price for my current home. After she left, I walked through each room, seeing it with new eyes. Not as the backdrop to my children's lives, but as property I would soon release. In the guest room, which had once been Drew's bedroom, I opened the closet and found boxes of his childhood mementos I had carefully preserved. Report cards, art projects, participation trophies. In Melanie's old room, I had kept similar treasures. Along with her first stethoscope and the lab coat from her hospital internship, I had been the keeper of these memories, the curator of our family history. Now I wondered, would my children even want these artifacts of their early lives? Or would they see them as clutter to be discarded, just as they had apparently come, to see me as an obligation to be managed? I closed the closet doors, deciding these questions could wait. For now, I would focus on practical matters, downsizing my possessions, preparing my house for sale, viewing the condominium. Emotional sorting could come later. That evening, as I sat on my patio watching the sunset, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. After decades of stability and sacrifice, I was embarking on a journey of transformation. There would be challenges ahead, difficult conversations, painful choices. But for the first time in 30 years, I was choosing myself. And that felt like both a revelation and a homecoming. A week passed in a whirlwind of activity. I had made an offer on the Harborside condominium, which was accepted the same day. The real estate agent had listed my house, staging it beautifully for the professional photographer. I had begun the monumental task of sorting through 3 decades of possessions, deciding what to keep, donate, or discard. Each decision felt symbolic, laden with meaning beyond the simple practicality of downsizing. Keeping my grandmother's china, but donating the everyday dishes we had used for family meals. Preserving select photo albums while scanning and digitizing hundreds of other pictures. Selling the dining table where we had celebrated countless birthdays and holidays. I was dismantling not just a household, but the physical manifestation of my identity as a mother. Through it all, my phone remained in the drawer, silent, but undoubtedly accumulating messages. I had promised my children a week, and I would honor that timeline. But I used the reprieve to grow stronger in my resolve, to clarify my thoughts, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. On the 7th day, I retrieved my phone and turned it on. As expected, there were dozens of missed calls and messages, growing increasingly frantic and then angry. The most recent, sent yesterday, was from Melanie. "Mom, this is ridiculous. We've waited a week as you asked. We're both taking time off work and flying in tomorrow. We'll be at your house at 2 p.m. This has gone on long enough." I texted back a single line. "I'll meet you at the Riverside Cafe at 3 p.m. instead." I chose the cafe deliberately. A neutral space, public enough to discourage dramatic outbursts, but with secluded tables that would allow for a private conversation. I would not welcome them into my home, not yet. This first conversation needed to happen on more equal footing. I arrived early, selecting a table on the outdoor patio overlooking the river. The day was cool but pleasant, the sky a clear blue that reflected in the calm water. I ordered a cappuccino and waited, my hands steady, despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. They arrived together, having apparently coordinated. Both looked tired and tense. Melanie's normally sleek hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, and Drew's face showed the stubble of several days without shaving. They spotted me immediately, their expressions a mix of relief and apprehension. "Mom," Melanie breathed, taking a half step toward me before hesitating. I stood and opened my arms to both of them. Whatever hurt and anger I felt, these were still my children. I had carried them, birthed them, raised them. That bond couldn't be erased, even if it needed to be redefined. The embrace was awkward at first, then desperate, all of us holding on, as if the others might disappear. "I've been so worried," Drew murmured against my hair. When we finally separated and sat down, a silence fell over the table. So many things to say, yet no one quite knew where to begin. "You look different," Melanie finally said. "Rested." "I feel different," I acknowledged. Drew leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Mom, about Barbara. It's not what you think. She never tried to replace you." "What is it then?" I asked calmly. "Explain to me why my children have been calling another woman Mom for years. Explain why you lied about where you were on my birthday." They exchanged quick glances, clearly having discussed their approach extensively. "It started that Thanksgiving at Aunt Diane's?" Melanie began. "We were both feeling a bit lonely, and Barbara was so welcoming." "She was going through a rough time," Drew added. "Her sons had just moved abroad, and she mentioned how quiet her house felt. It was just natural spending time with her." "Natural," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "And when did it become natural to call her Mom?" They exchanged uncomfortable glances. "It wasn't planned," Melanie said. "A few years ago, her grandson Theo, her son James's boy, was visiting from Australia. He called her Grandma, obviously, and one day he got confused about who we were. Barbara joked that we were like her adopted kids, and he started calling her your mom when talking to us. At first it was just around him," Drew continued. "Then it became a sort of affectionate nickname. It wasn't meant to replace you. Just a nickname." I could barely contain my incredulity. "And the lavish gifts? The gold and emerald necklace? Was that just a casual token of appreciation for your nickname, Mom?" Melanie flushed. "Barbara has been through a lot. Her sons barely visit. When they do, they're always asking for money or help with something, never just to see her. We wanted to make her birthday special." "And my birthday?" I asked quietly. "Was that not worth making special?" Drew looked genuinely distressed. "Of course it was. We were going to celebrate with you the next day. We didn't think one day would matter that much." "One day," I echoed. "No, I suppose one day doesn't matter much. Neither does 30 years, apparently." Confusion flickered across their faces. 30 years? Melanie asked. "The 30 years I spent sacrificing everything for you both. The 30 years I worked multiple jobs, skipped meals, went without new clothes or vacations or any luxury at all, just to give you opportunities." My voice remained steady, though my heart was pounding. 30 years of putting your needs first, your dreams first, your futures first. Drew reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Mom, we know how much you sacrificed." "Do you?" I cut him off. "Do you really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've conveniently forgotten who put you through college, who paid for medical school, who helped with the down payment on your first apartment in LA. "That's not fair," Melanie protested. "We've always been grateful." "Grateful?" I laughed, a short, harsh sound that made a nearby cafe patron glance our way. "Is that what you call lying about where you were? Skipping my birthday celebration? To attend hers? Calling her Mom behind my back for years?" "It's not like that," Drew insisted. "Our relationship with Barbara doesn't diminish what we have with you. It's different." "Different," I repeated. "Yes, I imagine it is different. Barbara gets to be the fun mom, doesn't she? The one with the lake house and the holiday gatherings. The one who gets expensive gifts and your presents on special occasions, while I get canceled plans and lies. Mom, please." Melanie's eyes filled with tears. "We love you. This is just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion." I looked at her, this daughter I had raised alone, this woman I had poured my life into. "No, Melanie. A misunderstanding is forgetting to call on a random Tuesday. This is years of deception. This is building a relationship with another mother figure, while allowing me to believe I was your only parent. Barbara isn't a replacement for you, Drew said desperately. She's just a friend who became family. And what am I? I asked, softly. Neither of them answered immediately. In their hesitation, I found my answer. I need to tell you both something, I said, my voice steadier now. Last week I had planned to surprise you with something that would have changed your lives, something I've been working toward for 30 years. Their expressions shifted to curiosity, perhaps even hope. They had no idea what they had lost. It doesn't matter now, I continued. What matters is that I've made some decisions this week. I've restructured my finances and my will. The provisions I had made for you both have been redirected. Melanie's face paled. What does that mean? It means that I'm finally putting myself first. The money I had set aside for you will now fund my retirement and eventually my care needs. The rest will go to charities supporting people who truly understand the value of family. Mom, you can't be serious, Drew stammered. Whatever. You think we did? I'm not punishing you, I interrupted. I'm simply acknowledging reality. You have 2 mothers now. Let Barbara help fund your dreams going forward. I stood up, gathering my purse. I've sold the house. I'm moving to Harborside Towers next month. I've enrolled in university classes. And I'm establishing a foundation for single parents. My life is changing, and our relationship needs to change too. They stared at me, seemingly unable to process this transformation in the mother they had taken for granted for so long. So that's it? Melanie's voice cracked. 30 years of being a family, and you're walking away over one misunderstanding? I looked at her. This child I had carried within my body, had nursed at my breast, had held through nightmares and fevers and heartbreaks. This isn't about one night, Melanie. This is about the life you've built with Barbara. A life you deliberately hid from me. A life where you call her mom and celebrate her milestones while lying to my face about where you are and what you're doing. We were going to tell you eventually, Drew said weakly. When? After how many years of deception? I shook my head. I don't recognize either of you anymore. The children I raised would never have been this cruel. With that, I picked up my purse and left them sitting at the table, their cappuccinos untouched. The moving company arrived early on a Wednesday morning 6 weeks later. I had spent the intervening time methodically sorting through 30 years of accumulated possessions, keeping only what truly mattered to me now. The rest had been sold, donated, or discarded. My new condominium at Harborside Towers was a blank canvas, all clean lines, natural light, and spectacular views. The previous owners had renovated recently, installing high-end appliances and luxurious finishes, but had left the walls a pristine white. Now it was my turn to make the space my own. I had hired an interior designer, something I would have considered an extravagant luxury before. Natalie was in her 40s, with an artistic eye and boundless patience as I discovered my own aesthetic preferences. There are no wrong choices, she assured me when I hesitated between fabric samples. Only what speaks to you. What spoke to me, it turned out, were textures and patterns I had never allowed myself before. Velvet sofas, silk pillows, hand-woven rugs from Morocco. I selected art that moved me rather than matched the furniture. I arranged my space for my comfort rather than to accommodate family gatherings. The foundation I established, the New Beginnings Scholarship Fund, quickly became my passion. I rented a small office downtown and hired a part-time assistant, a young woman named Zoe who was herself a single mother finishing her degree. Together, we developed application criteria, established a selection committee, and began reviewing the first round of applicants. My Italian classes at the university 3 afternoons a week introduced me to a new social circle, mostly retirees. like myself, but also younger students seeking language skills for business or travel. Professor Ricci, a distinguished man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and an infectious enthusiasm for his native language, made each class an adventure. La lingua è la chiave della cultura, he would say. The language is the key to the culture. I found myself looking forward to those classes more than anything else in my week. I practiced diligently, downloading language apps, watching Italian films, even labeling items in my new home with their Italian names. Something about starting from scratch, being a complete beginner at something, was oddly liberating. My relationship with Melanie and Drew remained strained. After our confrontation at the cafe, they had both returned to their respective cities, seemingly as shocked by my transformation as by my discovery of their deception. They called occasionally, their tone cautious, uncertain. I answered when I could, but no longer rearranged my schedule to accommodate their timing. 2 months after moving into my new home, I invited them both to dinner, the first time I had reached out rather than responded. They accepted immediately, perhaps seeing it as an olive branch. The evening was different from our gatherings in the past. I served a sophisticated meal I had learned to prepare in a cooking class, paired with wines I had discovered through a tasting group I had joined. We sat at my new glass dining table, overlooking the harbor lights, surrounded by art and objects I had chosen purely because they pleased me. "This place is amazing, Mom," Drew said, glancing around in obvious surprise. "It's so... not you." "Not the me you knew," I corrected gently, "but very much the me I'm becoming." "The foundation sounds incredible," Melanie offered. "Helping single parents get education, it's so meaningful." "It's work I wish someone had been doing when I was raising you," I replied. "It would have made a difference." The conversation remained polite but guarded. We were feeling our way toward a new relationship, one where I was Coral as well as Mom, a woman with her own interests and boundaries, rather than just their ever-available support system. When they left that night, Drew hugged me tightly. "I miss you," he whispered. "I'm right here," I replied. "Just different." As I closed the door behind them, I turned to survey my new home, my sanctuary, my statement, my starting point. The woman who had raised them alone, who had sacrificed everything for their well-being, still existed. But she had been joined by someone new, a woman discovering her own tastes, pursuing her own interests, building her own dreams. For the first time in 30 years, I was the protagonist of my own story. And despite the pain that had brought me to this point, I was profoundly grateful for the chance to finally find out who I might become. In the months that followed, my relationship with Melanie and Drew evolved gradually, sometimes painfully. We established a new pattern of monthly dinners, a commitment we all agreed to prioritize regardless of other obligations. Initially, these gatherings were awkward, all of us unsure of this new dynamic where I wasn't automatically putting their needs and interests at the center of every conversation. "So tell me about your foundation," Drew asked during our second dinner together. "How's that going?" I smiled, grateful for his genuine interest, and shared my excitement about our first round of scholarship recipients. 20 minutes later, I realized I'd been speaking almost nonstop. "I'm sorry," I said, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to monopolize the conversation." "Don't apologize," Melanie said, her expression thoughtful. "It's nice seeing you passionate about something." "Has it been that rare?" I asked. She considered the question. I think I've always seen you more as a function than as a person with your own passions." That sounds terrible when I say it out loud. But honest, I acknowledged. And honesty is what we're aiming for now. That conversation marked a turning point. Gradually, we established a new rhythm. I learned about Drew's creative frustrations. With his latest film project, and offered perspectives without trying to solve his problems. I listened to Melanie's concerns about hospital politics without immediately jumping to her defense or offering advice. They, in turn, began asking about my classes, my foundation work, my new friends. The boundaries I had established remained firm. When Melanie called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was in a foundation board meeting, I let it go to voicemail and returned her call that evening. In the past, I would have excused myself and taken her call immediately, regardless of what I was doing. Was everything okay? I asked when we connected. Nothing urgent, she admitted. I just had a question about a recipe. I didn't realize you'd be busy. I have regular board meetings on Tuesday afternoons, I explained. But I'm always happy to call back afterward. It was a small moment, but significant. I was teaching her and reminding myself that my time and commitments mattered, that I wasn't perpetually on call, waiting for their needs to arise. Drew tested the new boundaries differently. He called one weekend asking if I could help him move some furniture he had purchased. It's too heavy for me alone, and I don't want to pay the delivery fee, he explained. In the past, I would have dropped everything and driven the 2 hours to his apartment without hesitation. Now, I paused to consider my own plans. I'm afraid I can't this weekend, Drew. I have tickets to the symphony tonight and brunch with friends tomorrow. Have you asked any local friends for help? His silence spoke volumes. He had assumed I would say yes, just as I always had before. No, he finally admitted. I thought you'd be available. I'm sorry I can't help this time, I said gently. My schedule this weekend is full. Another test came when Melanie's car broke down. She called, clearly expecting that I would immediately offer to lend her mine, as I had done many times before. That's frustrating, I sympathized. What options have you considered? She seemed taken aback by the question. Well, I thought maybe I could borrow yours while mine is in the shop. I have foundation meetings all week that require me to drive across town, I explained. But I'd be happy to help you research rental options or rideshare services. These small moments of recalibration added up over time. They were learning that while I still loved them deeply, my life no longer revolved exclusively around their needs. I was no longer the automatic solution to their problems, the ever-reliable safety net always waiting to catch them. The most challenging test came 3 months after our initial confrontation, when Drew called with news. Mom, Olivia, and I broke up, he said, his voice heavy with sadness. It's been coming for a while, but it's still hard. She moved out yesterday. My heart ached for him. I'm so sorry, Drew. Breakups are always difficult, even when they're necessary. Yeah, he sighed. The thing is, I can't really afford the apartment on my own. I was wondering if maybe I could stay with you for a while until I figure things out. In the past, my immediate answer would have been yes, of course, stay as long as you need. I would have cleared out a room, stocked the refrigerator with his favorite foods, and put my own routines on hold to accommodate him. Instead, I took a moment to consider what this would mean for the life I was building. I care about you and want to support you through this difficult time, I said carefully. But my condo only has 1 bedroom, and I have commitments, classes, foundation work, social engagements that I need to maintain. His disappointment was palpable through the phone. So that's a no? What I can offer is help finding a more affordable apartment, perhaps a temporary contribution toward rent for a few months, and of course emotional support, I explained. But moving in with me isn't a workable solution. There was a long silence. Then, to my surprise, Drew chuckled softly. You know, the old mom would have rearranged her entire life without hesitation. I think I liked that version better. I'm sure you did, I replied, not unkindly. But I think I like this version better. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor, considering our conversation. In the past, I would have felt overwhelming guilt for not immediately solving his problem. I would have seen it as my responsibility, my role as his mother, to sacrifice my needs for his. Now I recognized that true support didn't mean enabling dependency. Drew was a capable adult with resources and options. My role was to offer guidance and appropriate assistance, not to be the perpetual solution to his challenges. The most surprising outcome of these new boundaries was how they actually improved our relationship over time. As my children adjusted to seeing me as a complete person with my own needs and interests, they began to engage with me differently, with more curiosity, more respect, more genuine interest in my life and thoughts. They were finally getting to know their mother as a woman in her own right, not just as the reliable backdrop to their lives. And I was discovering the joy of loving them not out of obligation or habit, but as a conscious choice made from a place of strength and self-respect. As the seasons changed, my world expanded in ways I had never imagined possible. The foundation grew beyond my initial vision. What began as a scholarship program for single parents had expanded to include mentorship initiatives, childcare cooperatives, and advocacy for family-friendly policies in workplaces and universities. We had helped over 200 individuals so far, with nearly 80% successfully completing their degrees. I remained actively involved, working 3 days a week at our now larger offices. The stories of our recipients inspired me daily, especially those who returned to volunteer or serve as mentors once they had established themselves. "Your own experience makes this personal for you," observed Martin, my co-director, during a board meeting. "That's what sets our foundation apart." He was right. Every application I read reminded me of my own struggles decades ago. Every obstacle our recipients faced, childcare challenges, inflexible work schedules, financial emergencies, were hurdles I had overcome through sheer determination and sacrifice. Now I had the resources to smooth that path for others. My Italian classes introduced me to another unexpected joy: friendship with women my own age who were similarly reinventing themselves. We began meeting for coffee after class, then for weekend brunches, eventually forming a tight-knit group of 5 women, all in our 60s, all embracing new chapters in our lives. There was Judith, recently widowed after 40 years of marriage, who was learning to navigate the world alone. Margaret, who had walked away from a high-powered legal career that had consumed her for decades, was now pursuing her lifelong passion for painting. Elena had divorced her controlling husband at 62 and was rediscovering her independence. And Catherine, whose children had moved abroad, was exploring the world through solo travel for the first time. "We should call ourselves the Renaissance Women," Judith suggested during one of our brunches. "We're all experiencing rebirth in our 60s. "I'll drink to that," Margaret laughed, raising her mimosa. "To new beginnings that prove it's never too late." Through these women, I found a community of understanding I hadn't realized I was missing. Friends who were navigating similar transitions, who understood the complex emotions of redefining oneself after decades of putting others first. And then there was Antonio, Professor Ricci. What began as a shared interest in Italian culture and Renaissance art evolved into something deeper. After class one day, he mentioned a lecture on Botticelli at the University Art Museum. "It might complement what we've been discussing in class," he suggested, his eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Perhaps you would be interested in attending?" I found myself accepting before I'd fully processed the invitation. Was this a date? Was I ready for that? The lecture led to dinner at a small Italian restaurant, where our conversation flowed effortlessly from art to literature to our personal histories. Antonio had come to America 30 years ago, leaving behind a failed marriage in Florence. He had built a life here, raised a daughter now living in California, dedicated himself to teaching. "And you?" he asked, pouring me another glass of Chianti. "What brings you to my class at this point in your life?" I found myself telling him everything: the decades of single motherhood, the recent betrayal, my determination to reclaim my identity beyond being a mother. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, his dark eyes warm with compassion. "So now you are discovering who Coral is when she is simply Coral," he observed. "That is a powerful journey." Our evening ended with a walk along the harbor promenade, the water reflecting the city lights. When Antonio took my hand, it felt both thrilling and natural, like a door opening to a room I had forgotten existed. "I would very much like to see you again," he said as we parted. "Outside of class, I mean." I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in decades. "I would like that too." Over the following weeks, we established a gentle rhythm of dinners, museum visits, and long walks. Antonio was unlike any man I had previously known: cultured, attentive, passionate about his interests, but equally interested in mine. He respected my independence, never presuming on my time or expecting me to prioritize his needs over my own. "You are like one of those Renaissance paintings you love so much," he told me one evening as we sat on my balcony watching the sunset. "Complex, layered, revealing new depths the longer one looks." At 65, I had not expected romance to enter my life. I had assumed that chapter was closed. How wrong I had been! My world, which had once been defined by the narrow parameters of motherhood and work, was expanding in all directions. New friendships, new purpose through the foundation, new intellectual pursuits, and now the possibility of new love. The hurt that had initiated this transformation remained, a tender spot in my heart. But increasingly, I found myself grateful for the catalyst that had forced me out of the familiar and into this rich, multifaceted life I was creating. The most significant test of my personal growth came unexpectedly during the Christmas season of my second year in my new life. Melanie, Drew, and I had established a more balanced relationship by then. Our monthly dinners continued, and they had gradually come to respect my boundaries and recognize me as a person beyond their mother. We were planning our first Christmas in my condominium, a departure from decades of tradition in the family home. "Mom, there's something we need to discuss before the holidays," Drew said during our November dinner. He glanced at Melanie, who nodded encouragingly. "It's about Barbara." I noted with satisfaction that neither of them tensed at the mention of her name, as they once would have. We had reached a point where Barbara's existence wasn't a forbidden topic, though we rarely discussed her directly. "What about her?" I asked calmly. Drew exhaled, seemingly relieved by my tone. "She's not well. She's been diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's." I set down my wine glass, genuinely concerned. "I'm sorry to hear that. It must be difficult for her, especially with her son so far away." Melanie and Drew exchanged surprised glances at my response. "The doctors say it's progressing, slowly," Melanie added, watching me carefully. "But she's already having memory issues." I nodded, waiting for them to continue. There was clearly more to this conversation. "Mom," Melanie finally said, her voice hesitant, "would it be completely inappropriate if we invited her to join us for Christmas dinner?" 2 years earlier, this question would have devastated me, reopening wounds of betrayal and replacement. Now I considered it thoughtfully. "She's alone, her health is declining, and she was important to you both during formative years of your lives," I observed. "I think it would be the compassionate thing to do." Their surprise was evident. "You wouldn't mind?" Melanie asked cautiously. "I've learned that the heart isn't a finite space," I replied. "Caring for Barbara doesn't diminish your love for me, and I'm secure enough in who I am now to extend kindness to someone in need." The truth was, I no longer saw Barbara as a threat or rival. The woman who had once seemed to be stealing my children's affection was now simply another aging woman, facing a frightening diagnosis without family nearby. My anger had long since dissipated, replaced by something unexpected: compassion. Christmas dinner that year was initially awkward, but ultimately healing. Barbara, a bit confused at times, but gracious, seemed genuinely touched by the invitation. I saw her watching me throughout the evening, perhaps trying to reconcile the confident, stylish woman hosting dinner with the overworked single mother she had effectively replaced in my children's affections years ago. "Your home is beautiful," she said during a quiet moment when we found ourselves alone in the kitchen. "And your children speak of you with such admiration." "Thank you," I replied, handing her a glass of water to take with her medication. "They speak fondly of you as well." She looked down at the glass, her hands trembling slightly. "I never meant to," she began, then faltered. "I know," I said gently. "The past is behind us now." And somehow it truly was. The bitterness I had once harbored had gradually dissolved, replaced by something unexpected. Empathy. Not just for Barbara, but for my younger self who had been so wounded by her presence in my children's lives. That night, after everyone had gone, Antonio helped me clean up the kitchen. He had joined us for dinner, fitting seamlessly into our family gathering, charming everyone with his stories of Italian holiday traditions. "You're quite remarkable," he said, drying a serving platter I had just washed. "For hosting my children's other mother for Christmas?" I asked wryly. He shook his head. "For your capacity for growth. Many people become more rigid with age, more set in their grievances. You've done the opposite." I considered his observation as I wiped down the countertops. I think I finally realized that holding on to hurt was taking up space I needed for joy. In the months that followed, Barbara's condition deteriorated more rapidly than expected. Melanie and Drew began taking turns checking on her, bringing her groceries and helping her manage her medications. Sometimes they would mention these visits during our dinners, initially with caution, then with increasing openness as they realized I could hear about Barbara without resentment. One evening, Melanie mentioned that Barbara had been having particular difficulty remembering to take her medications. "The home health aide only comes 3 times a week and we're concerned about the days she's alone," she explained. "Have you considered a medication management system?" I asked. The foundation recently partnered with a company that provides automated dispensers for elderly individuals living alone. They're programmed to dispense the correct medications at the right times, and they alert a designated contact if doses are missed. Melanie looked surprised by my suggestion. "That sounds perfect. How would we get one?" "I can make a call tomorrow," I offered. "The company often provides them at reduced cost for people with limited resources." 2 days later, I personally delivered the medication dispenser to Barbara's home and spent an hour helping her understand how to use it. As I was leaving, she caught my hand. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, genuine confusion in her fading eyes. I smiled gently. "Because kindness costs nothing, and I've learned that there's room in this world for all sorts of relationships." As I drove home, I realized how profoundly I had changed. The woman who had once been consumed by hurt and betrayal had evolved into someone capable of extending compassion to the very person who had been at the center of that pain. This wasn't about forgetting or excusing what had happened. It was about choosing how that experience would shape me going forward. And I had chosen growth over bitterness, expansiveness over constriction, joy over resentment. It was perhaps the most meaningful gift I had ever given myself. The following. Spring brought another significant change when Drew announced he was moving back to our city. "The studio is opening a satellite office here," he explained during our monthly dinner. "They've offered me a position heading the music department." "That's wonderful news," I said, genuinely delighted. Drew had been in Los Angeles for so many years that his visits home had always felt rushed, temporary. "There's more," he continued, glancing at Melanie, who nodded encouragingly. "Olivia and I are expecting a baby, due in September." I set down my fork, momentarily speechless. My first grandchild. Despite our complicated history, despite the reorganization of our family dynamics, this news filled me with unexpected emotion. "Congratulations," I finally managed, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I'm so happy for you both." Later, that evening, as they prepared to leave, Drew hung back while Melanie called for the elevator. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "we've been talking, Olivia and I, about childcare after her maternity leave ends. She'll be returning to work, and with both of us in demanding creative fields, our schedules can be unpredictable." I waited, sensing what might be coming. "We were wondering," he continued, "if you might consider spending time with the baby 1 or 2 days a week. Not as a primary caregiver or anything like that," he added hastily. "We're hiring a nanny for full-time care, but for some regular grandparent time? 2 years earlier, I would have immediately rearranged my entire life to accommodate this request. I would have seen it as both an obligation and an opportunity to be needed again, to be central to my child's life once more. Now, I took a moment to consider what this would mean for the life I had built, my foundation work, my classes, my relationship with Antonio, my own independence. "I'd love to be part of your child's life," I said carefully, "but I need you to understand that I have commitments now that are important to me. I could arrange for Wednesday afternoons, perhaps? That would give me time with my grandchild while still honoring my other responsibilities." Drew nodded, no hint of disappointment or expectation in his expression. "That would be perfect, Mom. Really." As I watched them step into the elevator, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had feared that setting boundaries would damage my relationship with my children. Instead, it had transformed it into something healthier, more balanced, more authentic than ever before. Throughout Olivia's pregnancy, I maintained my careful balance. I attended their baby shower, helped them set up the nursery, and offered advice when asked. But I also continued my foundation work, my Italian studies, now advanced enough that Antonio and I often spoke to each other entirely in his native tongue, and my rich social life. When little Sophia was born on a golden September morning, I was at the hospital within hours, cradling my tiny granddaughter with a joy that threatened to overflow. She was perfect, dark hair like Drew's, Olivia's, delicate nose, tiny fingers that gripped my thumb with surprising strength. "She's beautiful," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. Drew, his face showing the stunned, exhausted happiness of a new father, nodded. "We think so." In the weeks that followed, I discovered yet another new identity: grandmother. Not the traditional grandmother who drops everything to provide unlimited childcare, but a modern version who showed up consistently on Wednesday afternoons, who sometimes took Sophia overnight so her parents could have a date night, who FaceTimed. To see new milestones when I was traveling with Antonio or my friends. My condominium remained my sanctuary, though I added a portable crib and a basket of toys in one corner of the living room. Sophia had her special place in my home, just as she had her special place in my heart, but neither dominated the other aspects of my life. Antonio, himself a grandfather to 2 boys in California, understood the delicate balance I was establishing. "It is good for Sophia to see her Nona as a complete person," he observed one evening after witnessing my Wednesday afternoon with her. "Not just someone who exists to care for her, but a woman with passions, interests, a full life." I agreed. "I hope that's one of the lessons she learns from me, that a woman's value isn't measured only by what she gives to others." 6 months after Sophia's birth, Melanie shared her own news during our monthly dinner. "I've decided to leave the hospital," she announced. "I'm opening my own family practice." "That's been your dream for years," I said, delighted for her. "What finally made you take the leap?" She smiled, a hint of irony in her expression. "Watching you, actually. Seeing you reinvent yourself in your 60s made me realize I shouldn't wait until retirement to pursue what really matters to me." Her words touched me deeply. Without intending to, I had modeled for my daughter the courage to prioritize her own happiness and fulfillment. That night, as I prepared for bed, I found myself reflecting on the strange circular nature of influence between parents and children. For decades, I had tried to teach my children important values through deliberate lessons and careful guidance. Yet in the end, my most powerful teaching had come not from what I said, but from how I lived. Not when I was sacrificing everything for them, but when I finally began living authentically for myself. Sophia would grow up knowing a grandmother who loved her deeply, but who also valued herself. A woman who had discovered, later than most perhaps, that caring for others and caring for oneself needn't be mutually exclusive. It was, I realized, perhaps the most important legacy I could leave her. 2 years into my new life, Barbara's health declined precipitously. Her early-stage Alzheimer's had progressed faster than expected, complicated by a series of small strokes that left her unable to live independently. Her sons briefly returned from abroad, assessed the situation, then departed again after arranging for her care in a memory facility. Their visits were short, businesslike, devoid of the emotional connection she clearly craved. During a family dinner, Melanie shared her frustration at their seeming indifference. They spent exactly 3 days here, 3 days, then flew back to their lives, promising to call the facility for updates. I nodded, understanding her indignation. Some people aren't equipped for caregiving roles. It can be painful to watch someone you love fade away. But she's their mother, Drew insisted. How can they just abandon her? I thought carefully before responding. People have complicated relationships with their parents. We don't know their history. Well, I know that Olivia and I have been visiting her weekly, bringing Sophia, Drew said. The nurses say familiar faces help, even if she doesn't always remember who we are. Sophia makes her smile, Melanie agreed. She loves children, even now. I listened to their conversation, struck by the irony. The woman who had once been my children's other mother was now being largely abandoned by her biological children, while mine continued to show her compassion and care. Mom, Melanie said suddenly, would you consider coming with us sometime? The nurses mentioned that the more connections she maintains, the better. The request hung in the air between us. Barbara, in her more lucid moments, would certainly remember who I was, the woman whose children she had, in some sense, borrowed. Would my presence confuse or upset her? I'd be happy to join you, I heard myself say. Perhaps next Tuesday. When we arrived at Silver Pines Memory Care the following week, I found myself unexpectedly moved by the dignified environment the staff had created. Barbara's room was filled with photos, many of them featuring my children at various stages of their lives. A recent one showed Sophia on her lap, both of them laughing. Barbara looked up when we entered, her eyes clouded with confusion that gradually cleared as she recognized Melanie and Drew. My children, she murmured, reaching for their hands. Then her gaze settled on me, and I watched emotions flicker across her face. Recognition, embarrassment, uncertainty. Coral, she said, surprising me by remembering my name. You came. Yes, I said gently, taking a seat near her. I wanted to see how you're doing. Not well, she admitted with unexpected clarity. I'm losing myself piece by piece. I reached over and squeezed her hand. But you're not alone. As Sophia climbed onto her lap, babbling happily, Barbara's eyes filled with tears. I never meant to take them from you, she whispered. I was just so lonely. I know, I said. And in that moment, I truly did understand. The heart has room for many kinds of love. She nodded slowly, and something like peace settled between us. 2 women who had each, in our own way, mothered the same children, now finding a measure of grace in forgiveness, freely given and gratefully received. It was perhaps the fullest. circle of my journey. On my 70th birthday, I hosted a celebration unlike any I had experienced before. My Harbor View condominium was filled with the people who now populated my rich, multifaceted life. Melanie and her new partner, Drew and Olivia, with 3-year-old Sophia, my friends from Italian class, colleagues from the foundation, and Antonio, who had become my constant companion and late-in-life love. 5 years had passed since that painful birthday, when my children hadn't shown up, when I had discovered their secret relationship with Barbara. 5 years of transformation, growth, and unexpected joy. Barbara had passed away 6 months earlier, slipping away peacefully with Drew, Melanie, and myself at her bedside. In her final moments of lucidity, she had squeezed my hand and whispered, "Take care of our children." I had nodded, understanding that in her confused state, she had recognized a shared bond between us rather than competition. Now, as I looked around at the gathering in my home, I marveled at how profoundly my life had changed. The new beginnings. Foundation had supported over 500 single parents in their educational journeys. My Italian was nearly fluent. Antonio and I had traveled to his homeland twice, and I had fallen in love with the hills of Tuscany. My circle of friends had expanded to include fascinating women and men who challenged and inspired me. Most significantly, my relationship with my children had evolved into something stronger, more honest, and more mutually respectful than I could have imagined. The painful catalyst of their betrayal had ultimately forced us all to grow. As the evening progressed, Drew clinked his glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, "to the most remarkable woman I know, my mother." The room quieted as he continued. 5 years ago, Mom taught us all an important lesson about resilience, self-respect, and the courage to redefine yourself at any age. She showed us that it's never too late to become who you might have been. Melanie joined him, raising her glass. "To Mom, who funded my education and then taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that a woman's life should belong first to herself." Their words touched me deeply. Sophia, ever the center of attention, broke the emotional moment by climbing onto my lap and presenting me with a handmade card covered in glitter and wobbly letters spelling, "Happy Birthday, Nana." Later, as the party wound down and Antonio helped me clean up, he wrapped his arms around me from behind as I stood at the sink. "Happy?" he asked simply. I turned in his embrace, considering the question. "Yes," I said, realizing the truth of it to my core. Profoundly happy. And I was. Not with the uncomplicated happiness of youth, but with the hard-won contentment that comes from weathering storms and finding unexpected treasure in their aftermath. For 30 years, I had saved for my children's future, prioritizing their needs and dreams above my own. The painful betrayal that had shattered that dynamic had ultimately freed me to discover my own worth, to build a life centered on my own passions and values. As I stood on my balcony that night after everyone had left, watching moonlight silver the harbor waters, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path had been difficult, but it had led me here, to this moment of knowing myself fully, of loving without self-erasure, of finding joy not in sacrifice, but in authentic living. I had saved for 30 years for my children. But in the end, the greatest gift had been the one I finally gave myself, the freedom to become the woman I was always meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.